You know what advice you should take with a pinch of salt in chess? Everything you say, light squares. Let me get that joke in before all of you do. It's don't study openings, just do tactics puzzles the whole time. And this stuff is everywhere, guys. You go on Facebook, Discord, Twitter, Reddit. You'll see some message like this. Well, unless you are 1800 FIDE, I would not be bothering with opening theory. Just do tactics the whole time. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. Do you go around popping balloons in front of kids? And I understand why people say stuff like this. Because what's the point of learning 20 moves of the French defense if you're never going to see it? However, there are millions of people out there who take this stuff literally. We know this from the Lichess database. They'll play the French defense e4, e6, and then after that, they just start making stuff up. They get into bad positions and lose, and they're like, oh, how did I lose? I do tons of tactics puzzles. And so in this video, I'm going to show you 2 games that I played recently, which perfectly illustrate that doing tactics the whole time is not enough, and that you should take time to understand the beaten paths of grandmasters. So here's the first game that I played against somebody. We had e4, e6, okay, the French defense, some twin of the Caro-Kann, and now we have d4, d5, knight c3, and this person took in the center, so we had d takes e4, I had knight takes e4, and I don't know much about this variation. It's telling me in Lichess it's the Rubinstein or Rubinstein variation of the French defense, but I'd seen all this before. And I knew that if this person played knight f6, I'm going to take, because if that queen comes out, then I'm going to play moves like knight f3, bishop d3, bishop g5, and just harass this queen. And I knew it couldn't be right to play knight f6, or at least not many title players do that. And so this player played knight f6, I took. They brought their queen out to f6. I had knight f3. They played bishop d6. I played bishop d3. And I'm like, whoa, you better play h6, bishop f4 in this position. Is that light squares? I'm not listening to you. You're just some idiot making jokes on YouTube. The most important thing in chess is king safety. Your king can never be too safe. I'm like, whoa, dude, don't castle, man. Don't castle. Listening to you. This guy castled. And you know how to win this game? Bishop g5. And this queen is trapped. It's time to hit that resign button, guys. And you're thinking, what's this got to do with the French defense, light squares? Your opponent should understand in this position, after doing tons of tactics, that they need to play moves like h6 and prevent bishop g5. They should have that basic threat detection. Okay, the problem is that in this variation, even if you do all this, it leads to a lot of trouble. So after, say, something like h6 and castles, and let's say queen e2, I'm just making some stuff up here, knight c6, queen e4, threaten mate here on h7, go for a queen exchange. Okay, sounds sensible. We decline that. This is not a trade that suits white. Queen h4, and in this position I can tell you that there's only one good move here for black, which is to play bishop e7. You take my queen, I take your queen. And of course the queen is hanging here on f5, and you know the most popular move in the database is? Queen f6. And they lost because of bishop g5. Same thing again. You can't take because it's mate here on h7. And so you see, this is all happening for black because the queen has come out to f6, and that position is very difficult for us to play. It's very difficult to defend against the stuff white is going to do. And so let's roll this back to when it was this position here, after d takes e4, knight takes e4, and just open up my favorite thing in the world, the Lichess database. And you can see here in the Lichess database that 2.7 million games went with knight f6. Most popular move. Almost 3 million games go like this, knight f6. However, if you go into the Masters database, players don't really play knight f6 in this position. This is the top players now. They don't do this. You can see that the most popular move here is knight d7. And I don't know the theory about knight d7, but perhaps it prepares knight f6 so that if there is a capture here on f6, the queen doesn't have to come out. You can capture with this knight, because that queen is going to get harassed. And even if you look at some of the title players, what happens to their games when they play knight f6, okay, after takes here, you can see that half of these games actually go with g takes f6. So many of them understand that after queen takes f6, that queen is going to get harassed. So they just play g takes f6, and maybe the idea in this opening is to play rook g8 and apply a lot of pressure here down the king's side. And so you didn't have to buy a Chessable course on the French defense or buy some book on the French defense to understand any of this. You just have to go through the Masters database and see, okay, what are the top players doing? And if they're not making the moves you're making, there's probably a good reason. Okay, and so the second game is against somebody who played the Italian game against me. I have the black pieces, they have the white pieces. They went e4, e5, You know how much I love that. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Okay, the Italian game. And in this position, you know that I love to play knight f6. I love that knight g5, knight attack, fried liver stuff. Nothing makes me happy. But this guy was like, okay, I don't want to have a fight with this guy. d3, some quiet line. We have bishop c5. They had castles, reasonable. And I played this move d6. And they're like, aha. This bishop is now outside this pawn chain. It can never come to e7. And I'm going to play bishop g5 in this position. And there's an entire bishop g5 in the Italian game crew out there. We know this. There are some 300,000 games in the League Chess database that went like this. And this pin is completely useless, guys. Because you have h6. And now maybe the best engine move is to take here on f6. They play bishop h4. We have g5. They went back to g3. And I played h5. And they're like, oh, you just hung this pawn. And now f7 is weak. And they took. And I played h4. And they took here on f7. Like, you can't take my bishop despite the fact that it's trapped because I'm going to take your queen. I'm like, okay, go ahead, take my queen. H takes g3 and they took the queen. This is the most popular move in the League Chess database. Over 1,000 games like this. Knight takes d8. People are doing this stuff. They have no idea that this is a famous queen sacrifice in the Italian game. And I was so happy when I got to do it. And now we have bishop g4. This queen is hanging. This person played queen e1. I played knight d4. And one of the key things in this position is that the position is actually equal. If you turn on Stockfish, it's about 0 evaluation. White has to actually return this queen. And this person just played f3. And of course, you know how to win this. Basic mate in 2. Knight takes f3. King h1. Rook takes h2, checkmate. If you play something like knight c3, you can play here knight f3. Check. And you can't take because it's mate on h2. G takes f3, bishop takes f3. And now we're going to take here on this pawn. So if you move this pawn, we're just going to take. And you just start have to delivering some useless check here on f7. And we're going to deliver mate here on h1. And there is one way to stop mate in this position, which is just to play h3. And now I think black needs to play this move knight e2. And you can't go here on h1 because after rook takes h3, g takes h3, bishop f3 is checkmate. So white has to return this queen. And so you can go ahead and study this position on your own. But you might say something like, well, you can't expect beginners and stuff to understand intricate queen sacrifice in the Italian game. And that's true. However, this position starts to unravel because this player makes this bishop g5 move, which they shouldn't be making. It's a kind of dubious move. And so let's load up again the League Chess database and just study some of the stats around this. So there were some 2.1 million games that went like this. And you can see here that the third most popular move is bishop g5. Over 300,000 games went like this. And if I was to turn off the filters on higher rated players, you'll find that bishop g5 actually becomes the most popular move. And now if we toggle here to the Masters database, okay, you can see that this position has been reached 3,500 times. And guys, there's only 20 games here where titled players play bishop g5. And the win stats for black are pretty impressive. Okay, it's just a totally dubious move because after bishop g5, you have h6 and g5, and you have pressure here on this castle king, and the position of this king is not yet determined. And you would take black in this position. And so what happens in this position after d6? All a player has to do, again, they don't have to buy some chessable course on the Italian game or some book on the Italian game to understand what happens. You can see here that there's c3 and there's a6 and there's a4, bishop a7. Okay. And so you start to get a sense that the way top players play this is that they apply a lot of pressure down the queen side and that the role of this dark square bishop is not yet determined. And so this is the point I'm trying to make in this video. Sure, we need to do tons and tons of tactics puzzles, but it makes sense to study openings, to open up the Masters database, to understand the beaten paths of titled players, because that is a way we can get into safe positions or positions where tactics work in our favor. Thank you very much for your time.